All right, hello. I am here with Debbie Spring, author of Breathing Soccer, and she is going to answer a few questions and talk a bit more about her book with us today. So thank you for joining me, Debbie.
My pleasure.
Excellent. So I guess the first question, okay, so I've never done an interview about a book before, so I don't really know how we get into discussion without giving away too much of the plot line. So do you want to give a bit of an overview of the book to start us off?
Yes, it's a great book for people who love sports, particularly soccer. And it's a great book for people who also have asthma. And it's a book about a girl who has asthma, and she loves soccer more than anything else in the world. And she has a lot of obstacles because of her asthma, and she overcomes these obstacles so that she can get her goal, which is to be able to play soccer.
Perfect. So I guess where I always would want to start would be, why did you choose to write this book as opposed to anything else you could have written? Why did you choose to write Breathing Soccer?
Okay. When my son was little, he used to play soccer, and I went to all the different matches and practices. So I enjoyed soccer very much, and so I had that to build on. And also, I had asthma all my life since I was a baby, and so I wanted people to know that I'm an athlete, and I do all kinds of sports. And asthma never stopped me from doing anything, and I wanted this book to portray that.
That's perfect. That's awesome. So what kind of sports do you do?
I do quite a bit. I love the summer sports, which are kayaking and hiking and swimming, anything with a boat, anything in the water. I also like winter sports, which are skiing and all kinds of skiing, downhill, cross-country, snowshoe. So I just love to be active. I like bicycling, you name it.
Awesome. So do you find, I know just from my experience, do you find that winter sports are harder for your asthma than summer sports, or is it a bit of both?
Not for me. Some people get asthma when they're in the cold. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when it's very, very cold, I might get asthma. So if I wear a scarf and just put it around my mouth, I'm okay, and I can still do the sport.
Excellent. So do you, I know allergies were a big component in the book. Do you have a lot of stuff in terms of allergies yourself, or?
I have a lot of allergies, but they've decreased over the years. Something to do about getting older, so there are some perks about getting older.
Excellent.
And also there are a number of things. By keeping in shape, you can be better with your asthma. Swimming is a great one. It increases the lung capacity, and I do a lot of swimming.
Excellent. So I guess what was your writing process like when you started this book? Like, my question was, that I had written down, and this is why I don't tend to do written questions, was why did you choose to write about asthma, which you've already covered. So what was your writing process like in terms of, say, doing any sort of medical research prior to the book, or, just what did that look like?
Well, I come from a medical family. My father's was a doctor, he's retired. My mother was a nurse, my sister was a nurse. I used to work for my father as a medical secretary, so I know a lot about medicine. I'm very interested in medicine. And of course, there's so many different places you can do research on Google and find information on asthma and read up on it. I knew a lot about asthma because I have asthma, but you want to be accurate and you want to be with the times. So I did a lot of reading online.
Excellent. So that brings me really well into my next question, which is kind of funny because you have a basic outline of what I'm asking, but not a lot of the specifics. So you just mentioned having research that's current, but you chose to set the book in 1992. Is that correct?
Yes, the reason for that is because I brought in Silken Lohman, and I was talking about the Olympics, the Summer Olympics that year, and Silke and Lallman, I saved all the articles during the Olympics just because I was just so enamored by her. She was in practice, and she was struck by a German boat, and she was very, very hurt, and she had to have many operations on her leg, and she was told that she wouldn't be able to be in the Olympics. And nothing stopped her. She was so determined that she would still compete, and she did compete, and she got the bronze for Canada. So this was a big inspiration for me. And in this book, I'm trying to show too that you can have a role model, and a really good role model, and it doesn't have to be your sport. I don't row,
Yeah.
but I just was so enamored by her courage and by her overcoming all odds to be able to compete in the Olympics. So she was my role model, and that's why I chose that year.
See, and it's really interesting because one thing that I noted is that, a lot of people, and I think, and I'm not sure if it tends to be more people who don't live with chronic disease or disability, but I feel like a lot of people tend to kind of portray people with chronic diseases or disabilities as being inspirations, and and I think it was, to me, obviously a really good thing that you didn't, drop the I word, so to speak, in the book until it was like right at the very end. And, I can't remember what the context was, but I think it was just, I can't remember. I think it was more Lisa wanting to, you know, not necessarily inspire people, but like just use her story for good versus oh, this sucks, right? So I was very much a fan of the fact you didn't drop the inspiration word, and you also didn't drop it with what you were just talking about. So
Well, you don't want a book to be didactic. This is an ordinary girl, and she has a problem,
yeah,
and she just wants to play soccer. She
yeah,
doesn't want to be a hero. She just wants
exactly,
to play soccer. Very simple.
yeah,
And
exactly.
and that's her goal.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, just doing stuff, doing stuff like I do volunteer stuff with the Asthma Society of Canada, and, I feel like people outside of the little circle of asthma, like, they'll tend to be like, oh, that's like so inspiring that they're doing this thing. I'm just like, I'm living my life, and so I definitely think that was, you know, it was a really subtle thing that I don't think most people would notice reading the book, right? But it was one thing that I kind of zoned in on as I was going through the text. So definitely, appreciate that because, a lot of times people are portraying people with chronic disease or disabilities as being inspirational, and we're just living our lives, right?
Exactly. But when anything bad happens to you, like asthma, you learn to conquer it. You learn to live with it, and you can do anything. I mean, I have my black belt in karate,
Excellent. That's awesome.
and I did a 9-hour test
Yeah.
and I have asthma, and I got my black belt.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So, I think too, there's a core theme running within there. I mean, there's lots of core themes that I have written down, but um, I think two things that you really addressed through the book were the role of advocacy and living a life as an advocate rather than going and being like, yeah, I'm going to go do advocacy work today. It's I think that in terms of, just educating the people around her and, sorry, Lisa educating the people around her in the book, just kind of organically and living, kind of living in a way that was, at first it was kind of like, oh, this sucks, and like, my life is falling apart, and then kind of using those experiences afterwards for good and figuring out how to kind of build that coexistence with asthma and, you know, I guess use what she had learned to help others, figure out what she needed better than just, letting her parents do all the work, right?
Yes, in a children's book, you don't want the parents making the decisions. The child has to make the decisions, and whether they're the right decisions or not, the child has to learn from these choices.
Yeah.
And that's the point of a children's book.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Um, so have you, I mean, I don't know how many discussions you've engaged in since publishing this book. You released this in 2008 or 2009, right?
Yeah, 2009, I think.
Yeah. So have you been able to talk to any kids about the book or?
Oh yeah, I've traveled across Canada. I've spoken to over 6,000 students about my books, and including this one. And it just shows that you can pick anybody to be your role model, to be your hero, and get inspiration from them. And you want anybody with a problem just wants to fit in. They just want to be treated like everyone else. They don't want to be treated differently.
Exactly. And I think I think one of the things I noted down that was that there was a lot of a lot of negativity towards the main character in the book. And why did you choose that to be her situation? Because I mean, I think there was a lot more resistance in her world just from kind of everybody, from her parents to to her sister, to her friends, and her friends' parents.
Okay. Well, in a children's book, you want obstacles and things to go wrong. If everything was peachy keen and lovely and wonderful, it would be a boring book. So the more things that go wrong and the more hardships that the main character has, the more interesting the book, because she
Right,
has to overcome all these problems, and she does.
right. Yeah. So I guess another thing, I'm just kind of jumping around all over the place here. I guess in terms of like the education aspect, that kind of grew in the book or really organically, like it does in real life. So I really enjoyed that aspect. Um, so, for example, there is a point in the story where Lisa's friend Beth has to inject her EpiPen. Um, what was the motivator kind of behind having that aspect in the story?
A lot of kids carry an EpiPen, and there may be a time when they need somebody to help them.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the idea behind that.
Okay. So
And also
yeah, I
having
guess
a child involved, yes.
right. Yeah. So I mean, I thought that was I thought that was interesting just because there were probably any number of people around who could do it, but her friend was the one who ended up
Mhm.
being the one smart enough to be like, hey, this needs to happen.
Again,
Um,
in a children's book, you don't want the adults to take over and do everything because
right.
that's too easy. You want the
Yeah.
you want the children to be enabled.
Yeah. I mean, I just, I think it's really interesting. Like I work with kids, and it's very interesting with me the conversations I can have as, of course, being among the youngest of our staff, but also being the one who has asthma, and just the different level of connection I have with our kids who have asthma is really interesting to me. But just the way that they also look out for each other, and that goes for the kids who have asthma and who have anaphylaxis, but also the kids who don't, right? Is they're really good for looking out for each other, and I think that part captures that aspect really really well. Um, just because we need to have our visual aids here. Like these kids, most of them probably know pop off the blue cap and jab it in. They probably know that, right? Um,
But knowing something and actually doing it are two different
well,
things.
exactly. But the fact that these kids that I work with actually know that is the first step, right? Because if something's happening, they might be the first ones to notice and then to come get us, right? Rather than have no idea what's going on.
Exactly, a child can save somebody's life
Yep, exactly.
because time is the essence.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think, I definitely appreciate that being captured within that book because, I mean, I think there's, it brings up the discussion, right? Like, like we're having right now, that these kids will read the book and hopefully know that it's okay to act, right? They don't have to wait for somebody else to do it.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right. So I'm just like glancing over my notes here. Um, so I guess one of the things that I noted as interesting, especially with the setting being in 1992, which is, the year after I was born, so that's, very interesting to me, was that um, there's a lot of, I mean, not a lot, but the peer support that the main character, Lisa, is getting is from people who are in the hospital with her, versus I think now it would be a lot of the time, like you said, you want the main character to be the one involved, but I think a lot of the time now it would be the parents tending to reach out probably online for their information rather than getting it in person, correct?
I think parents still would turn to doctors and nurses and organizations, not just online. I think they would do all of them.
Okay, fair enough. Um, I mean, because like, I think Lisa's parents, because they didn't seem to have a lot of knowledge, right? Like they basically did what they were told, but they didn't initiate taking first steps. And she was the one who, was trying to make things better, right? Whereas her parents were trying to keep her in a bit of a bubble. Um, which I mean, I think is
Well, parents can become very overprotective,
yeah,
and that's their way of love.
yeah.
But it can be stifling and it can really harm the child.
Well, exactly. And I mean, for the parents, it's a coping mechanism, right? But um, I think it was interesting how basically through through the child learning that she was able to gradually get her parents to break out of that shell, and it was through her taking the first steps though, which I think at 12, 13 years old is really realistic, but also brings up the struggle of needing your parents to still do things for you because nobody's going to let a 12-year-old book a doctor's appointment or um, self-refer somewhere or something. I mean, it's hard enough in the Canadian medical system as it is from a realistic standpoint, but just the fact that she was basically figured out through her peer support network of people she had met in the hospital, was able to kind of learn those things and make those things happen. Which I mean really speaks once again to the self-advocacy component, which is it's not in there. It's not in the story very overtly, but it's definitely in there as a core theme.
Exactly. Kids have to learn and should learn that to look outside the box. So if somebody says no and they're not happy with that decision, they have to figure out a way to make it become a yes. There's always another door that will open. And this is the point of the book, that never give up. You can get your goals. It may be hard to find at first, but if you keep plugging away at it, you will achieve them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. So, is there anything else you want to add or get just kind of bring into the conversation as we're going along here?
Well, bringing soccer is also for people who don't have asthma. Anybody who loves soccer can enjoy the book. And soccer, you have the World Cup every year, and people all over the world love soccer. And soccer is, anybody can play it. It's not an expensive game to play. You just need a ball.
Yeah.
Whereas some sports are too expensive for kids to do all over the world. And so this is a universal game and a universal theme.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's interesting too that because the book is so heavily focused on soccer, you're probably gaining both young readers who have asthma and aren't necessarily involved in sports, but also readers who don't have asthma but are just want to read anything involving soccer, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. Awesome. Um, I'm just checking my notes here to see if there's anything else that I haven't covered. It's interesting actually. One of my notes said, as I just mentioned, living a life of advocacy and not being held back, and that's something you brought up a couple times as we've been speaking. And I think it's just interesting that in completely parallel lines, I made that pretty much exact same note, which is I think really speaks to the fact that you were able to drive that home within this book, right?
Well, you can. I want kids to know that they can do anything, even though they have asthma. They can be anything. They can, just put their goals as high as they want. And asthma may slow them down sometimes, but it won't stop them.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too that in terms more like in terms of adults, which I mean, I'm reading this book from the perspective of an adult. So it's, probably if I handed it to one of my kids at work and said, okay, read this, tell me what the main message is, I'm sure that would be their take home is that, we can do whatever we want. Um, but I think it's interesting reading it from the other side of, I guess last spring I was working with the Asthma Society and partnered with them to produce can't speak right now, a resource on physical activity and asthma, and just some of the feedback that I got sharing it on Facebook, was really interesting from people who had either had asthma for years or, even some people who didn't have asthma, just who took a glance through it and were, just curious to see what this big project I've been working on for months was. But just some of the insights they had about the realities of exercise and asthma was very interesting. But I think it's also interesting to note too that with my kids at work, most mornings when I take them to the gym, I think usually in the mornings we have 5 kids in our program, 4 or 5 kids in attendance in the mornings who have asthma, and usually most of them are in the gym with me, which is, awesome for me to see. But, I think it really proves the point of, maybe these kids are actually being targeted a bit better because of their asthma to get involved in stuff.
Well, the more exercise they do, the healthier they're going to be.
Yeah,
And the healthier they are, the happier they're going to be.
exactly.
And it's a social thing too, so
Yep.
that adds to their happiness. And sports have a lot of perks to them. It's a very accepted thing in society, and it's a fun thing to do. And people come to watch the games and cheer you on. So it's wonderful when they can get involved in this.
Yeah, and I think, I think the teamwork aspect is obviously huge, and I think there's a lot of hidden parallels between, you know,
Excuse me.
like there's a lot of parallels between like being an athlete and there's always like the stereotypical marathon of chronic disease, like comparison, but I think there's a lot of parallels between actually being a team athlete and living a healthy life with chronic disease. So I think the sports comparison is very you know I, I can't even like think of a word here, but it's it's appropriate. I think that she wasn't able to Lisa wouldn't be able to like win a soccer game by herself, just like she couldn't do all of the things she did to help get her asthma into control by herself, right?
No, teamwork is wonderful. And being part of a team, it doesn't matter if you're the best player or the worst player, you're still part of the team. And it just is a wonderful bond.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and that's another aspect that, and I don't know if you want to speak to this, was that, basically what happened in the book was the coach wouldn't play Lisa because of her asthma, and goes away to soccer camp, and you know gets really good, but the coach doesn't know because he won't let her play, right? And
Exactly.
I think it's about like the hidden potential, basically, that yeah, the secret weapon, right? You can throw a lot of people off because they think you can't do something because you have this disease, and yet I think it's something like 50% of Winter Olympic athletes have exercise-induced asthma. So obviously it's not a thing that needs to limit people.
And those are great role models.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any closing thoughts? I think we're probably just about done here, unless you have, questions for me or, just final thoughts about what you, what you want to tell people reading this book or who are considering reading this book?
Well, Breathing Up Soccer is also a fun book. So if you want a fun read, uh, you can enjoy this book. And if you love soccer or any kind of sport, you can enjoy this book.
Absolutely. All right. That's excellent. Thank you for joining me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come in and have this conversation. And I look forward to, you know, hopefully being able to continue this conversation. I'm going to also embed this on my blog, carryontheprairies.com. So we'll try to engage in some discussion in the comment section below, and
Okay.
hopefully,
You can get this book on Amazon or Chapters. So I hope you'll go out, or your library. So I hope you go out and read this book.
excellent.
Breathing Soccer.
Is Breathing Soccer available electronically yet?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Yeah. So also on Amazon?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. So thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
It
Nice
was
speaking to
wonderful
you.
to chat with you.
Take care.
You
Bye
too.
now.